Hello, if you like horror and paranormal stories, you're on the right channel and you have no reason not to like, comment, and subscribe. Welcome aboard, have a pleasant time. It was a cold late afternoon in northern Russia. Ivan was driving from Moscow to St. Petersburg, with his sister, Natalya, beside him. After several hours on the road, the car's headlights began to fade into the thickening fog. The world in front of them turned into a blurry, dark sea. Ivan, keeping his eyes on the road, muttered, "This isn't normal," but Natalya's uneasy glance made him feel even more anxious. The fog grew denser with each passing minute. As the car progressed, it felt like everything on the road was slowly disappearing. Eventually, every vehicle around them had slowed to a crawl. Moments later, they were the only ones left on a deserted highway, surrounded by nothing but fog and darkness. Natalya, in a worried tone, whispered, "What's going on, Ivan?" "Everything is so silent," Ivan, gripping the wheel tighter, replied. "I don't know, but we need to get out of here." Suddenly, a light flickered in the distance, but there was no clear source. It seemed as if the headlights of a distant car were flickering, but it was an illusion. Ivan, trying to calm his nerves, slowed the car down. "Maybe someone else is here," he said. Natalya, feeling uneasy, replied, "Just be careful." But before Ivan could even respond, the light flickered again and then disappeared into the mist. Out of nowhere, a strange buzzing sound began to echo from both sides of the road. At first, they thought it was just the wind, but it quickly grew louder and more erratic. Ivan's heart began to race. The fog was so thick now that their headlights seemed to be useless. "Do you hear that?" Natalya asked, her voice shaking. Ivan could barely manage a reply. "Yes, but we need to stay calm." Just as he spoke, a figure passed by their headlights, moving so fast that it seemed to vanish before they could fully see it. "Did you see that?" Natalya asked, her eyes wide with fear. Ivan, shaking his head, muttered, "I didn't, but I felt something. We need to stay alert." As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of a scream echoed through the fog. They both froze, eyes darting around, but there was nothing in sight. The silence that followed was almost suffocating, broken only by that eerie buzzing sound. "This is not right," Ivan whispered. "I know," Natalya replied, clutching the seatbelt as if it could protect her. As they continued driving, more cars appeared in the distance. But instead of passing by, the vehicles began to slow down and come to a halt. People were standing outside their cars, nervously holding their phones. Ivan decided to get out and speak to the other drivers, but as he approached them, the buzzing sound grew louder, and he turned back to his car in a hurry. "Something's wrong with this place," he said, but before Natalya could respond, a car behind them reversed at high speed and stopped abruptly. The people inside the car shouted, "The end of the road is here." "Turn back," Ivan, in disbelief, tried to accelerate, but before he could, a shadowy figure appeared in front of the car. Ivan slammed the brakes, but they didn't respond. The figure remained still, staring at them. "Move!" Natalya screamed, but the figure stood its ground, slowly creeping closer. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished into the fog. All that remained was the unsettling silence. For a moment, Ivan and Natalya thought they might have imagined the figure, but when they turned to look back, they saw another figure in the distance, seemingly moving towards them. "We have to go," Ivan said, but he wasn't sure if they would be able to escape whatever was haunting them. As the car continued forward, a scream echoed behind them. They looked in the rearview mirror, but there was no one there. The light from nearby cars began to flicker, and then went out entirely. The fog was so thick that it felt as if they were driving into nothingness. Ivan's grip tightened on the wheel, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. "We need to get out of here now," Natalya said, panic rising in her voice. Just then, another figure appeared in the headlights, standing still in the middle of the road. Ivan tried to brake, but the car wouldn't stop. The figure didn't move. It wasn't until it was right in front of them that it suddenly disappeared, leaving nothing but the dense fog behind. Ivan slammed on the brakes again, but the fog seemed to pull them deeper into its grasp. The noise almost like whispers surrounded them, and the figures continued to flicker in and out of existence around them. "Can you hear that?" Natalya whispered. "We're not alone out here," Ivan nodded slowly, unable to take his eyes off the road. "It's like they want us to stay," he said. But no matter how fast they drove, the fog grew thicker, and the figures continued to follow them. They couldn't escape. The further they went, the more cars they saw, but they were all abandoned, with no people in sight. The fog consumed everything around them, and soon, even the highway disappeared. Ivan and Natalya were left in a void, surrounded by nothing but the eerie sounds of the fog. "This place doesn't exist," Ivan muttered, his voice breaking. "We're trapped," Natalya replied, her face pale with terror. Eventually, the fog lifted, and the road ahead became visible again, but it was a road they didn't recognize. They had passed through a different dimension, and now they were lost in a place between life and death. The figures in the fog were not just illusions, they were the lost souls of those who had disappeared in that same stretch of road, unable to move on. Ivan and Natalya were now part of that haunting legacy, never to be seen again. The highway was never the same after that night. Drivers who passed through that stretch reported strange sightings, flickering lights, and an overwhelming sense of dread. The highway had become a place of lost souls, a place where the living could no longer tell what was real and what was part of the ever-present fog.